yes, we are going to find problems in the components. There needs to be a way of flowing that information back to the developers of that component, and they need to be able to deal with it. Again, overcommitment is something that you have to look at, particularly overcommitment driven by a large number of bugs. Same as with sequential models. You know, you've got that overcommitment problem. You've got the potential for a large number of bugs, creating a great deal of chaos and confusion at the very end during the integration testing, and also, again, late involvement in the test team. So these are all challenges, organizational challenges that, you know, based on the lifecycle model that you're looking at, you have to think about, how am I going to overcome this, right? These things, if you just say, oh, well, this stuff will take care of itself, what we've seen with our clients is it doesn't take care of itself. It erupts into a set of issues later. Okay, so we got to organize in a way that is life cycle aware and that deals with the challenges inherent in the life cycle. But that's necessary, but that by itself is not sufficient, because you then have to move to the next consideration here of what kind of skills do I need in my team. So there are 4 general areas that I usually think of when I think of skills for the tester. One is general professionalism, right? Reading, writing, getting along with people, you know, the ability to function in a business environment in an effective way. That would be true whatever you were doing, right? Whether you were an attorney or a doctor or a software tester or what have you, right? General professionalism is required. There's an understanding of the technologies that are in use. And of course, that's a moving target, right? So that's something that we have to stay up on. Now, that's not to say that the testers necessarily have to be as technologically savvy as the system architects or the database administrators or the programmers, but they should have a basic understanding of how the technology works and what its weak points are. Of course, there's an understanding of the business or application domain. So the depth of understanding required here tends to depend a lot on what industry you're in. Certain industries like banking, finance, engineering, insurance, those are very specialized in their skills and requires a great deal of understanding. One of our clients does geological software for the oil industry. They will only hire people that have oil exploration-related degrees, like petrophysicists, geologists, and so forth. Because they say, you know, we can teach people everything else they need to know, but the oil business, now that takes 4 years in college to learn that. So you need to understand what the depth of knowledge is required there, and of course, understanding of testing skills. And all of those do vary from one organization to another. There needs to be some way of assessing and managing levels of skills, whether that's a quarterly process or it's part of the annual performance review or what have you, but there needs to be some way by which the set of skills is managed and optimized. Again, keeping in mind that that's a moving target, that the set of skills that you need in your organization will evolve. Now, the technology tends to evolve quickly, but so do other aspects, testing and the application as well. So that has to be managed to keep the right team in place. And this issue of the skills assessment and possibly management, this is something that you need to think about both for in-house and for outsourced teams. And this is a mistake that we've seen a number of our clients that are using outsourcing make, is they assume, oh, well, we've handed that problem off, right? We've hired this outsourced team to do our testing or our development and our testing. All the skills problems just magically became their problem. Well, no. If a vendor is not competent to do the job that you've hired the vendor for, in the long run, whose problem is that? Right? It's not just the vendor's problem. I mean, it's partly the vendor's problem because eventually you assume that they'll be found out and the vendor will be let go. But how much damage will they have done in the meantime, right? How big a mess will they have created that you have to clean up? So if you're going to use an outsourced team, you have to think about how you're going to assure the skills. I'll come back to that in a little bit. excuse me. So assuming that you've got the skills identified, these are the skills that we would need to have in our organization, then you can assess the team against this sort of this idealized standard that you've come up with. You know, the perfect test team would look like this. Okay, so where do we stand? Identify the weaknesses in your team. And identify the strengths as well, of course. Now, to fill the weaknesses, what can we do? Well, one thing that we can do is we can look at the existing people and say, okay, well, here's where they're weak, and you can use training. You can use cross-training. Where I've got strong people, I've got weak people, I'm going to buddy up the strong person with the weak person, have to teach them how to do this, right? So there are a lot of ways to try to cross-pollinate within your team and get shared skills. Now, suppose you're weak across your whole team in a particular area. There's something that you decide we need to know this, and nobody knows it. Then you could add new people to bring in those skills as well. I mean, it's all well and good to go out and get your existing staff trained, but that's really only a starting point, right? Because you don't actually have a skill in any meaningful way until you've applied it to solve a real-world problem. Do you agree with that? That's sort of a necessity. A theoretical thing that you know is one thing. The ability to use it to do something in a testing project is something different. So I think even if you're going to use training, you still have to figure out, well, how am I going to make sure that that can be practically applied? And it can be very helpful if you can bring in somebody who's got those skills as well to serve as a mentor as the new skills are being rolled out. Now, another option is to identify a testing service provider who can fill the gaps. And this can make a lot of sense if either your particular skill is a transient one. In other words, you need it for a very limited period of time on a particular project, but not forever, right? Like, for example, compatibility testing. If you've got a browser-based application and you want to make sure that that browser-based application is compatible across a wide range of operating systems and browsers and security software and so forth, you can try to build that skill within your own organization, or you could just say, you know what, there are test labs out there that not only have the equipment to do that, but they have people that know how to do that. Why not just hand that whole problem off to them, right? So that could be a good option for dealing with skills where the need is significant, but the need is very transient, and there really wouldn't be a payback to trying to develop that skill or the capital equipment in-house. That's going to lead to a need to be very careful in your selection of these outsourced vendors, because if you're hiring a vendor based on a specific skill area, of course you need to be able to look at, do they actually have that skill, right? And we see sometimes clients go, well, we're going to look at price per hour. But that's not what you're paying for. In this particular case, you're not buying an hour of testing done, right? You're buying a collection of configurations where those have been tested against your application. Can they actually do that? Okay, so that brings us to another consideration which I think is important to keep in mind with respect to any sort of distributed testing. Now, this applies whether you're going to use an outsourced testing service provider or if you're going to develop, say, an offshore